This is Luke Van Blaricom. He's here from the Office of Undergraduate Admissions here at UCF. He's one of our good friends and colleagues over there. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you guys. I did recognize a couple of you guys when you came in, and thank you for the warm welcome. So I work over in the undergraduate admissions office. I kind of work closely with the Honors College probably the last nine and a half years now. And I oversee our National Merit Scholars Program and our National Hispanic Scholars Program. I always like to start off by just kind of getting a feel for the room. So how many of you guys are on a Pegasus scholarship? Pegasus Gold, Bronze, Silver? Okay. Anybody have a Provost scholarship? Anybody in National Hispanic Scholar? Anybody National Merit or Benequisto? Okay, a couple of you guys. Okay, all right, that just kind of helps me know where everybody's at. Well, good. Well, all of those scholarships are scholarships through my office, so you're welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for the money.
Yeah, all right.
Thanks,
So, so we're going to spend a couple minutes today, and one of the things that I participate in, I have occasionally served on our Scholarship Appeals Committee. And that through that committee, it's over the years has kind of given me a lot of insight into when students run into problems, common problems that we've seen, and ways that you could have avoided being in that situation in the first place. Now, I will go ahead and preface this by saying I am not an expert in all forms of financial aid, right? So I work with a lot of merit scholarships. I do a lot of things for various scholarship students at UCF. When it comes to different forms of aid, there are a lot of them. There are federal forms of financial aid, there are state forms of financial aid, there are institutional or UCF forms of financial aid, and all of those have different rules and different policies and different procedures that we have to abide by. And so that's where it can be kind of tricky, and we'll go into a little bit more detail in a couple of minutes about how to navigate through each of those things. But the goal of this workshop after you leave is to try to help you when you leave feel like you're confident of where you're at, and we want you to keep your scholarship. That's the key thing. We're wanting to try to bring you up to speed. Now, back when all of you guys got your merit scholarships offer, a lot of you were provided in the mail a document that said, congratulations, you got this scholarship from undergraduate admissions, and here are the conditions for the award. And you guys picked up that piece of paper and you're like, oh, that's really great. And then years later, if I asked each of you right now, like, where is that form? How many of you know exactly where that form lives?
I
right
have
now?
it. Right on my
Is it,
computer.
you have it somewhere?
I have it right on my computer. It's scanned PDF.
See, okay, that's really smart. Because a lot of you lose that, and then you kind of are like, I don't really know. And if you go on the financial aid website, they try to maintain that documentation and some of the things on there for each of your scholarships. But sometimes, you know, I'm calling up financial aid all the time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is wrong, this is outdated, we're not doing it that way anymore for the scholarship. And so sometimes even their information on their website can be slightly not the most current and up-to-date information then. But the form that you were given outlines very specifically how your scholarship works and all the conditions that you have to meet for that. And so let's kind of start chatting a little bit about how your scholarships work. First of all, there are a lot of awards out there. For example, just in the state of Florida, we have over 10 merit scholarships of varying levels and degrees, and some of them even have different requirements that apply to you guys then. And then for out-of-state students, even more complicated, there are over 12 then. And the thing I always like to share is that you guys love talking to each other, right? You have roommates, you've got friends, maybe you know people in this room, and you guys love to be like, oh my gosh, I just had this happen, or hey, I'm not sure how this is gonna work. You're older than me, how'd this work for you? And then the student's like, oh, this is how it worked, and I was able to work this out. And you're like, great, okay, I understand how it works now. And sometimes it's good information, and a lot of the time it's really bad information that you're getting, because hearing from your peers is, while it's great advice, it's advice. It's not the word, it's not the financial aid policy, it's just friendly, hey, a first stop of who you can ask for then. So the reason why I pull that up is there are a lot of you on a lot of different scholarships, and the different criteria and requirements may vary between you and your peers. Then you saw just by a show of hands how many different scholarships are just represented in this room alone. So first off, always keep that in mind. Now, merit scholarships don't include things like Bright Futures or need-based financial aid. So how many of you guys know, where does Bright Futures money come from? How many of you guys have Bright Futures? Okay, so a lot of you have it then. Where does that money come from?
Florida Lottery.
The Florida Lottery. Who administers that program?
No idea.
That's a great answer. Any guesses who administers that program? It is the state of Florida Department of Education up in Tallahassee, Florida that administers that program then. It's not UCF. We are not in charge of that. We don't get to make up rules for that. We don't oversee it. What we do is that if the state tells us you qualify for that, financial aid puts that Bright Futures information on your financial aid portal then. But that's how it works. And then pretty much we send a bill to the state and we say, hey, we need to get reimbursed. We gave the student this scholarship, and then they have to reimburse us for that merit scholarship then, just as an example. Need-based financial aid, Pell Grants, subsidized loans. They could be a PLUS loan or a Parent PLUS loan. You have all those other institutional grants out there. I've been seeing like Black and Gold grant, Orion grant, like there are all these different grants out there, that little pockets of money that our financial aid office has as a university and institution that we can also give out to students as well. So those are other forms of need-based financial aid. Federal Work Study is another example of like a need-based financial aid.
Real quick, who didn't sign this yet? That's what I thought. Okay.
So for the majority of you on your UCF merit scholarships, there's a couple things that we ask for you to do. We ask that you take at least full-time course load, which means 12 credit hours every fall and spring semester. We also ask that you maintain a minimum GPA. It used to kind of be, for the majority of you, this will apply, but it's a cumulative GPA, let me correct that, and we'll go into more detail on that in a second, a cumulative UCF GPA of a 3.0 or higher. We do have the requirement for you that the FAFSA must be received by May 1st each year for your scholarship to renew. And then your total aid package cannot exceed the cost of attendance. And if you look back on that form that we gave you when you were awarded your merit scholarship, that's a condition that's outlined on there. And people always get very concerned, especially your parents probably read that and were like, oh no, they're going to see how much money we make and they're going to take our scholarship away or your scholarship away. And that's not what that means. What that means is that you guys cannot stack financial aid awards that exceed what it actually costs you to go here then. Now, without going into too much detail, cost of attendance is kind of just an estimated budget of what they think that average UCF students' costs are going to be for tuition, room and board, books, transportation, personal expenses then, right? So what they don't do is they don't go in and add in your actual costs. They poll and survey UCF students to try to come up with an average. And that is what that cost of attendance amount reflects. So when you guys get aggressive and you start applying for scholarships, maybe through outside organizations, maybe through UCF, and you're like, great, I got 4,000 from them and 2,000 from them and 500 from them, and you keep stacking and you have a merit scholarship from us, and maybe you qualified for Bright Futures, and maybe you got a form of need-based financial aid. You can't keep stacking those where now you have more scholarship money than what your cost of attendance is. So it's the same reason that our quarterback for the football team isn't getting a $400,000 scholarship to to come to UCF when it doesn't cost $400,000 to go here then, right? So you guys are kind of held to the same standard as a lot of athletes at UCF then. So they can't get these ridiculous dollar amounts, and neither can you guys, all right? Most of you, this applies. You have to be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. You wouldn't be here because you wouldn't have the merit scholarship unless you were one of those. So I'm just going to skip over that. Now, the renewal process. I do get a lot of questions about the renewal process every year. And one thing to keep in mind, especially, how many of you guys, this is your first semester at UCF? Do we have any sophomores? Okay, all right. So for the majority of you, this is your first semester, and the big question I always get is, we recognize it's your first time away from home for many of you. You're transitioning into the college curriculum. You may have, you're living with roommates for the first time. Fluffy is not with you, cuddling in bed with you every night. So it's a transition, it's a process. And a lot of you, after the fall semester is over, panic when your first semester grades come out then. For a lot of you, you probably are fine. Some of you get a lot of anxiety and super stressed out over your first semester grades. And so you worry that, oh no, I got a B+ in this Calculus 8 course. I'm sunk. Like, I might as well just leave UCF and never come back. And the way that renewal process works for a merit scholarship is that financial aid does not go in and renew your scholarship every single semester. Instead, what they've done is your merit scholarships, they've made you eligible for 2 semesters as long as you're enrolled full-time by the start of each semester then. Now they, at the end of the spring semester, will go and check for renewal. And that's when they're going to go in and see that yes, they were enrolled full-time, yes, they earned 24 credits minimum, and yes, they have the UCF cumulative GPA of a 3.0 or higher then, right? And so if you meet those requirements at the end of spring, they will renew your scholarship for another 2 semesters then. That is how that works. So it's not every semester that they're going and checking your grades. So what that means is if you get your grades this semester, and let's say you come below the 3.0 UCF cumulative GPA, do you guys have time during the spring to try to improve your GPA? You absolutely do then, all right? So,
Me when I go home,
now, the one point I wanted to make the difference is that this doesn't apply to you guys, but it gets a little more complicated. For those of you on Benequisto or National Merit, there's a difference between UCF cumulative GPA and a cumulative GPA, right? They sound alike, they kind of look alike, they may be similar. The difference is between the UCF cumulative GPA takes into consideration only your UCF courses then, where the cumulative GPA also adds in dual enrolled courses, not really AP because you get credit, or you just got credit for that but not a grade. But typically, or other institutional, maybe you did like an internship at X, Y, and Z college over the summer and you got a credit from that. If that was a grade they issued you, that's all factored into your cumulative GPA then. And so I've had students run into this before. I had a student of mine that called me up and was like, I've lost my scholarship, I'm done, and my GPA at UCF is below a 3.0. And then to his surprise, the fall semester rolls around and, well, look, financial aid actually looked at his cumulative GPA because he was on a very specific scholarship then, not his UCF cumulative GPA. So he actually was renewed because he had some dual enrolled coursework. And he had moved home and was like deciding whether or not to come back for classes. And he called me up like 2 weeks before classes and he's like, why is my scholarship showing up? And I'm like, I don't know. And I called financial aid and we renewed his scholarship and he was surprised. So he was like, oh no, and he was trying to get back. Anyway, long story short. But he made an assumption that he thought he understood what GPA they were looking at. And in this case, he was actually incorrect. Now, your scholarship is renewable up to 8 undergraduate semesters or 4 years. We call that. A lot more of you guys are starting to take classes over the summers now, but summer is not available for your UCF merit scholarships. Bright Futures may possibly, if you qualify for Bright Futures, can now possibly be used for summer semesters or your tuition bill, all right? But your UCF merit scholarships do not fund for a summer semester then. So that's why I put years in quotes, because you guys hear year and you think that means I can go year round and my scholarship is always available. The scholarship cycle works fall, spring, fall, spring, fall, spring, fall, spring, all right? For those of you on Benequisto, you know I hammer this home with you guys. This is a unique condition that you can't drop or withdraw from a class or get a WWF, NC. I even ran into an issue this year with an incomplete. I had the student get in a class that prevented him from having his scholarship renewed. So there's all these weird conditions for Benequisto. For the majority of you, that doesn't apply to your actual UCF merit scholarship, though. That's kind of a quirky scholarship they're on. So helpful hints. One thing to do is check for holes and to-dos on your MyUCF. So my office is super short-staffed right now, and so I've been having to pitch in and help out by taking phone calls from people. And I feel like right now I'm spending probably half my day right now taking phone calls from current students that are on hold for various things, which just baffles me. I'm like, here we are, it's coming up on like almost 2 months that you guys have been here, and people are like, yeah, I have a hold, I haven't received my financial aid. I don't know why. And trying to be polite, but they love to play dumb and act like I don't know what it's for. And then I'm like, well, what would it be for? Well, I think it might be for my AP scores or my ACE Cambridge scores or this dual enroll transcript. I thought I didn't have to send that. And I'm like, yes, you did, because we've been sending you emails and we've texted you. And so one of the things that to keep in mind is sometimes there are various holds out there. A hold that I put on you may block registration. It may block your financial aid from going out. A hold that a different department puts on you may do none of those, though. So holds from different areas can have different ramifications. But if you ever see a hold, that's typically not a good thing. So that's our way to try to flag you guys, to have you take some kind of action to be able to resolve an issue that you have for a number of different reasons. Now, the other thing is to-dos. To-dos can be a little bit trickier. Some of them prevent certain things from going out. I think a number of years ago, we had all those online modules that were like the alcohol awareness and what consent means, right? You guys had to do that stuff. So if you didn't do those, sometimes in those cases, that can prevent you from doing other things because you had that to do on your MyUCF account. Now, sometimes to-dos are just out there as a gentle reminder. I kind of say that's like a hold light. It's a way to kind of let you guys know, hey, you really should do this. Try to work on this in the coming weeks. And where hold is like, hey, you need take immediate action to resolve this situation then. But if you ever see those things come up, ask about them, try to do everything you can to resolve any kind of hold or to-do. If you ask questions of financial aid, ask specifically about each individual award, and this is a big one. Especially for those of you guys that may be receiving a merit scholarship and are on Bright Futures. Because when you go to financial aid, what tends to happen is you will have a verbal conversation with them, right? So you guys signed into any of you guys actually been to the financial aid lobby yet? Yeah. So you go in, you sign in with them, and they're like, number 72, and you're like, oh, that's my number. And then you walk over to it, and you may be meeting with like a student, it could be a financial aid professional, and they're going to be like, what's your question today? And you guys typically start off with the biggest financial aid award, right? The little stuff you probably aren't as concerned about, but you're like, hey, I've got this big scholarship. How will this work if I want to do a study abroad trip? And they're like, okay, well, your provost scholarship works this way. And you're like, great, thanks so much. What did that student, and they leave, and what did that student just do wrong then? Did they ask about Bright Futures? Did they ask about any other kind of award that they thought that by asking about their provost scholarship that would encompass all the other rules for any kind of other award. So you had to be very detailed when you ask them questions about not just this scholarship, and you can't even say, how does this happen for all my awards? Say, how does this happen for my provost scholarship? Are there different rules for Bright Futures that I should be aware of? What about this $500 award I got from the Honors College? How will that impact anything? You have to be very detailed and ask those individual questions then, and not just lump it in with your financial aid. Because sometimes what they'll do is, and we're kind of all guilty of this, we deal with a lot of volume at UCF. And so, and I've been dealing with this week, we're taking phone calls, but with the volume comes, I got your phone call and I've got 6 more in line that I need to grab, and I need to get through your question as quickly as possible to be able to move on. And so if you're not going to ask me very pointed and specific questions, I'm just going to kind of broadly answer them and I need to move on then, right? And so that's kind of always a helpful hint. Ask individual questions about each of your awards. Speak to your advisor before you take any action. You guys are so fortunate that you have a group of honors advisors, 3 of them now, that are here to assist you guys and meet with you guys. So many times I've had, I had students call up not too long ago and say, hey, I was playing around my schedule and I accidentally clicked withdraw from a course. So who can I get to fix this for me? And I'm like, nobody, because hey, why are you playing around in your schedule and why are you clicking on buttons trying, I wonder what happens if I do this? And once you do that, it's not just like, oh, let me click this button and hey, magic, you're back in the course then. It doesn't work that way. And so if you have questions about what if I do this? What if I want to do study abroad? What if I want to do this internship or co-op program and I want to be gone for the fall or the spring semester? How can I do that? How can I make that work? Set up an appointment with the the honors advisors and ask them. If they don't know, they'll send you to the right people. And oftentimes, probably what they'll do is they'll tell you from their perspective what they've seen, but many times they're going to say, but you need to reach out to financial aid and confirm this and get it in writing from them as well, okay? So I always encourage you, talk to your advisor. Sometimes, especially you guys coming out of high school, you're in the mindset of, high schools are really great about, oh, I can make this exception for you and I can do this. It's harder in a college setting because we're like a small city. We have over 68,000 students here. There's a bureaucracy, there's a policy, there's a procedure of how we have to do things on campus. And we don't have the ability just to like pick up a phone call or send an email over to somebody to get exceptions made for you then, right? So always ask ahead of time. And try to obtain things in writing when confirming. This can be a little hard and you have to plan ahead, right? So if that deadline for that study abroad program is tomorrow and you want to know about your financial aid on Thursday night at 10 o'clock at night, are financial aid people working at Thursday at 10 o'clock at night? Probably not. So are you going to hear back the next morning, first thing when they open? Probably not. So you have to just plan ahead to be able to reach out to the appropriate offices on campus and try to secure things in writing. And I know from my perspective, I'm very careful about what I put in writing for that exact reason, because I never want to provide bad information to you guys that then you can come and shake my face later and say, you put this in writing, you said it worked this way. That's not what happened. So I will tell people like, this is how it works. From my experience, it should work this way. Please confirm with financial aid though, because I want to be sure that you guys are always on the right track and I'm not giving you bad information about that then. Okay, so here are some common mistakes that I've seen students make over the years. A lot of these come up at the Scholarship Appeals Committee, and I was just at that meeting a couple days ago, and yeah, we had a couple situations come up, and they were very similar. And as soon as the financial aid officer presents them to us, and we're like, oh, here we go again, because we see a lot of common things that happen consistently from meeting to meeting. One of them is, hey, I asked my friend about dropping a class, and they said they did, and it was fine. This is no joke. So I actually had this happen with a couple National Merit students a few years ago. One of them was on a UCF scholarship. One was on the Benekiso scholarship. And they were roommates, and they said, hey, I did this and I didn't have a problem. And they're like, oh, okay, it must work like that for me too then. And this goes back to what I was referencing earlier about talking to each other, because what did he do? He dropped the class, lost his scholarship then. His roommate was correct because he was on a different scholarship. He can drop a class and withdraw from it and not have any immediate impact then, where unfortunately the other roommate, not so much. I thought it'd be okay to miss the spring semester. I didn't know I needed to appeal to maintain my scholarship. How did I get an exception made for me? That's a common thing that we see a lot too, is you guys these days love exceptions. Just, how do I get around this rule? Who do I need to talk to? Or oftentimes maybe you'll call your parents too and be like, Mom, Dad, I need you to call Luke and get him to make this exception. And that kind of goes back to being proactive, reaching out, asking appropriate questions, and then letting us tell you, here's what you need to do then, rather than taking action and then trying to apologize for it later then, right? So it's much harder for us to work with you guys to correct a mistake than to give you good advice ahead of time then. We see this one a lot. I know my GPA was a 2.997, but shouldn't that be close enough? That literally happened yesterday. And no, 2.9, we don't round up. So it's either a 3.0, 0, if it's a 2.9999999, nope, it's not close enough. Then it has to be a 3.0. There is no rounding up. And so, again, the student was trying to appeal because they were like, give it to me, it's so close. And that C in organic chemistry 2, guess what? We know organic chemistry 2 is hard, right? Calculus 2 and 3, that's hard. We know those are difficult classes, so just saying, well, it was awfully close, probably not the best reason to provide. You guys get hung up on this one a lot too. I used grade forgiveness and I didn't know I had to make up those hours. My GPA is a 3.4 though, and I'm not worried. So how does that work? So for example, let's say we'll use organic chemistry 2 as an example. Let's say you guys came in as freshmen, and probably against all advice you got from honors, advising, and from myself, you're like, no, I'm jumping into organic chemistry 2 my first semester. And you're signed up for that right now, and you're like, ooh, this is a lot harder than I thought it would be, right? And you're in the class, and you end up getting a D in the class, and you want to go to Harvard Medical School. So now what do? You want to retake the class for the spring semester. So you sign up for organic chemistry 2 for the spring semester. You get maybe a B or even an A in the course this time. Well, what happens to that grade for the fall? Technically, you were enrolled full-time for the fall. Technically, you may be enrolled full-time for the spring, but once you repeat that class, that initial attempt does not get factored into earning 24 credits by the end of the spring semester, right? Because that organic chemistry 2 class can't count twice toward the 24 credits. So you get 3 credits toward that. So what you would do is if you met with them or met with myself, we would advise you, yep, if you want to retake organic chemistry 2, you can do that, but you're going to have to add some additional courses in the spring semester then to still be on track to earn 24 credits by the end of spring, all right? Grade forgiveness is tricky, and we see a lot of this too. Even though, man, it broke our hearts yesterday, we had one of these come up, and a student had like a 3.98 GPA, but they did grade forgiveness, and they lost their scholarship because of it then, regardless of their GPA. This is always a big one too. I probably got an email from financial aid, but I didn't read it. And this kind of drives us nuts. We know you guys get a lot of email to your Knights mail, right? It's like, hey, it's National Corn Week, come eat corn on Memory Mall, and we're doing X, Y, and Z. And we know you get those emails a lot, right? But when we communicate with you guys, we don't have the option to email at your Gmail. We don't have the option to to just reach out and call in most situations, right? So our official form of communication is always going to be through your Knights Mail account. And the other thing about Knights Mail, just like Google, if you have Gmail, or I don't even know, what other emails do you guys use these days other than Gmail?
No, Gmail.
Yeah.
Do you guys still use Yahoo?
I use
Nobody uses Yahoo. I get made fun of from my Yahoo
AOL.
address, right? Because they have like
AOL.
a Hotmail or something, right? Yeah.
I have a Hotmail still.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's a oldie one. So, that is our official form of communication for you guys, is always going to be through your Knights Mail. And so, just like Google, it has a spam folder. Look in there, because sometimes even Knights Mail will send stuff to spam folders or junk mail. So make it a habit to periodically check in those. I'm guilty of that time to time. I'll tell a student that I'm working with, like, I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have this. Have you checked your blah, blah? Check your spam folder, and they're like, no, I don't have it. And then I go and look at mine, and I'm like, oh, whoops, it's in that spam mail. So I'm guilty of it, but just make it a regular habit to occasionally look in there. But be sure to carefully read, especially when it comes to financial aid emails. You guys like the subject line, merit scholarship requirements, and you're like, blah, 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 okay. Anyway, yeah, let's go get pizza. And you kind of don't read all the way through it, and it may say at the bottom, like, we need you to reply by tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. at the latest. And oops, you just skipped over that. Well, financial aid is going to come back and say, we told you you had to reply by, did you read that section? No, I didn't read that. Like, it may be anywhere contained within that email. If there's anything I know about financial aid and their policies, they're long. They send these long emails, right? So it's not just like a little text. It's like, you know, hey, Jimmy, come and see us. It's going to be like, you are missing these documents and blah, blah. And it's going to be super long, but you have to thoroughly read through that whole email to be able to get all the information that they want to communicate to you, right? That's a really loud class next year. I wonder what they're, do you know what class
It
it
just
is?
sounds like a laugh track.
Yeah. It's like I'm on a sitcom or
Duct
something.
tape,
Yeah.
the entire
It
class.
does. It totally does feel like that though.
Financial aid told me all I needed was a 2.5 GPA. So this is kind of an example, but points to a bigger issue, is that you go in and have a conversation with somebody on campus. It doesn't have to be financial aid, it could be anybody. And you walk away, and in your mind, you retain a piece of information in your head, right? And so in this case, you may come in and say, hey, I need to know what my cumulative, or what's my GPA for renewal criteria. And we'll say a 3.0, and you go, great. And then somebody's like, hey, did you see the UCF football scores 25 last night? You're like, no, I didn't. 2.5. It's a 2.5 GPA that I need. And you remember incorrectly then. So you come back to us and or financial aid, and you're like, well, somebody told me it was a 2.5 GPA. And I'm like, okay, well, and then, you know, this happens in my office a lot. I'll be like, well, sir, ma'am, did you get the name of the person that you were working with? It was a woman. And I'm like, well, we have 45 women in my office, so that doesn't narrow it down. I'm happy to address it with a staff person if you can provide me a name. Well, I can't, but I assure you they told me it was a 2.5. And then my answer is, well, I assure you they would not have communicated that to you, because A, they don't work with scholarships, and we don't have any scholarships that have a 2.5, so I have no idea where you got that information from. So 2 mistakes there, they had a verbal conversation, they secured nothing in writing, and if you go by and speak to somebody in person, which is okay, and sometimes you can do that, just say, hey, do you mind? A lot of people are going to be wearing name tags like I'm wearing right now. Ask them, can I get your name? Can I get your, and I'll tell people, because I have a weird Dutch last name, I'll just be like, I'm Luke, L-U-K-E, and they're like, what's your last name? And I'm like, don't bother with that. I'm the only Luke in undergraduate admissions. If you call and ask for Luke or say, Luke told me this, they'll know who you're talking about. And they're like, okay. But at least that person can then come back and say, hey, I heard this from Luke. And that way you have some type of recourse to take then, right? So you may want to take in a little notebook, make a note on your phone in the note section or something, and just kind of detail that information so you have something to fall back on should an issue arise in the future. This is like the most frustrating one is like, well, who do we need to talk to change this, right? Who do we need to call? I have no idea what to
It'll go in a second.
Okay.
Woo. So that is always a frustrating one because again, you or maybe it's even your parent is calling and saying, we need to get a rule change for us. We need to have an exception made for us. And sometimes, especially when it comes to financial aid, we don't have that kind of judgment where I can just be like, I joke all the time. So I have friends that work for the Walt Disney Company, and I'm like, I blame you guys for this, right? We're not Disney World, where if you've had a bad experience, I'm so sorry. Let me comp you something. Let me give you tickets. Let me give you a free drink. Let me buy your dinner for you, right? So when you come in, you're like, well, I was given bad information and somebody's going to give me my scholarship back. We don't have that ability to just be like, I'm so sorry you had a bad customer service experience. Here's their scholarship back. Have a magical day, right? So we don't have that kind of flexibility. And so the less that you can have to ask for exceptions and rules to be changed and modified for you, the better off and the easier experience that you're going to have. Here's the one we talked about earlier. When you're organic chemistry too, we know it's hard. We know classes are hard. We know a lot of these are hard. You don't have to write to us and tell us that I never thought this could be this difficult. And we'll sit there as a committee sometimes and we'll look at the schedule. And we had a student yesterday that had the schedule that was like organic chemistry. I don't know, I keep using organic chemistry because I took it in college, and that was when I was like, well, I won't be a dentist any longer. But they were taking that. They were taking like calculus 3, and they were taking, I don't know, like it was like physics with calculus 1. And we looked at that schedule and we were like, what is wrong with and some of you may be totally fine with that kind of schedule, but we looked at their previous grades and we could see that they had already been struggling. So why would you not get advising about trying to work with a better schedule to help you be successful then? And so hard classes are just the worst excuse ever. We know. Always ask for permission, don't beg for forgiveness. And that's often the opposite mentality, and it's kind of the mentality that you have to make a very big shift in your planning and your thinking and how you handle things about asking ahead of time, right? Always ask ahead of time. The less you have to come to us and say, I've screwed up, I need help. Are we going to help you? Yes, but are we going to kind of be limited in sometimes how we can assist you? Absolutely, that could definitely be a situation. All right, so we had a couple minutes. I can maybe answer some questions for you guys. Anything you want to know? This is why I always say, you guys try to stump me. You're like, oh, I've got a doozy for Luke. And I will tell you if I don't know. Yeah.
Can you answer anything about Bright Futures?
What about Bright Futures?
So does the dual enrollment GPA account with that as well?
It can, in some cases, yep. Yeah. So, because those grades count as, it depends on the language that the state has, but if I remember correctly, the state has language for cumulative GPA, which means typically they're going to use the UCF cumulative GPA, but it's at the financial aid's office's discretion to also use the cumulative GPA then as well.
So if we meet all the requirements for renewing grad teachers, do we, like, does it automatically get renewed, or do we need to go to that website to be applied
To renew Bright Futures?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't have to ask for Bright Futures to be renewed every year necessarily. Financial aid will do that renewal process automatically as long as you're looking to try to come back then. So you don't have to keep reaching out to the state and asking them like, hey, I want Bright Futures again, because they know most of you guys want it again. Yeah. Yep.
On one of the slides, it was like in the mistake slide, and you said
Okay.
something about, like, I thought I'd take the spring semester off. I didn't know I had to get an appeal.
Yes.
Yeah, what is that?
Okay, so for example, let's say you get an internship with, I don't know, like I had this student one time that got an internship at Honda up in Ohio at their manufacturing plant. And she's like, hey, I'm not gonna be here for the spring semester. So the UCF Merit Scholarship, the way that works is that you have to maintain enrollment consecutively. So fall, spring, fall, spring, fall, spring. You have to keep enrollment, right? You can't like decide you're going to go and climb Mount Everest and you'll be back in a year and then come back a year later and be like, well, I'm resuming, where's my Merit Scholarship then, right? Because you have to maintain that continuous enrollment. So in that girl's situation, what we advise you guys to do is, if you're not going to be here and going to break that continuous enrollment, you actually have to appeal and ask permission to not be here and for them to hold on to your scholarship, right? So when you do that, you know, it's kind of like funny, but we try not to laugh too hard. But when we see those at our scholarship appeals meetings, we're always like, yes, absolutely. Yay! We're so excited the students did something right because you have followed the appropriate channels, we approve it then, and we can move on then. So that's what that means of if you think you may have an experience like that coming up, that's why I always tell you guys, like, talk to the honors advising people, let them know, and they'll tell you like, hey, you may need to appeal if you're not going to be here for the spring or the next fall semester then. Now, going back to what typically happens with students, let's say that student did get that Honda internship and she just like didn't enroll for the spring semester. She comes back in the fall, scholarship's not there. So she's like, well, where the heck is my Provost or my Pegasus Gold or something? And so she calls up financial aid and they're like, no, you weren't here for the spring, you have to appeal. She goes to get the appeal of the scholarship back. Typically what the appeals committee may do is they may say, we'll give you the scholarship back, but we're going to make you lose a semester of eligibility, or if you've been gone a year, 2 semesters of eligibility. So now instead of having 8 semesters, or in this case maybe like 7 or 6 left, now they drop down to like 4 or 5 semesters of eligibility then. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
We'll go here and then we'll come back over here.
So for Bright Futures, like, we don't have to do anything on the site. Will it be automatically done? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I mean, unless you guys get an email that says, this is the Florida Department of Education and you must take action with your Bright Futures, please don't be like, well, Luke told me I don't have to. So, but yeah, typically with Bright Futures, you don't have to go in and keep trying to
Unless they
redo that, unless they prompt you or mail you something that says, hey, you need to take action for that. Yes.
So about the 24 credit hours thing by the end of the, so like, what if you failed the class in the spring and then you didn't get credit hours for it because it was a no credit?
Then if you did not earn the credits, then you would not have 24 credits and you would lose your scholarship then.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's always a hard part about not doing well in the spring semester, is that it doesn't give you that flexibility to be able to change route and adapt, because it's the end of spring and the renewals happen during the summertime. And yeah, good question. Yes.
So So I'm a business major. I'm trying to go abroad for a semester. So 2 questions.
Okay.
It's like pass-fail for exchange programs. So how is that going to affect the GPA for the scholarship, and does it work towards that?
Yeah, good question. So if you're doing a pass-fail course, typically pass-fail courses, and there are different kinds I've seen out there. Sometimes I've seen pass-fail where it's just pass-fail and you don't get credit, and then like Symposium, you do get credit then. So while that doesn't count toward the GPA requirement, it does count toward earning 24 credits by the end of the spring semester. Now, if you're doing pass-fail over a summer semester, the way that works is if you're like, this is your first year, you are doing fall and spring courses, right? The renewal happens over the summer, but your summer course is not factored into that renewal. What will happen though is that if you get an actual grade, that's going to be factored into that GPA for the next renewal cycle then. If it's pass or fail, it's kind of a wash. If you do over the summer, it's not going to make a big difference then. Yeah. Other questions you guys have?
Who knows when the withdrawal deadline is? November 1st, that's right. So if you're not on Benny Keisto, that's something you should know. If you're on Benny Keisto,
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't withdraw.
And I think it's important to point out Luke's point about planning ahead for these things. So if it's Halloween at 4:30 p.m. and you're trying to take first steps on gathering information about what would happen if you withdrew from a class, how that affect your financial aid, you may not have enough time to get that information to make that informed decision in time for the deadline. So if it's something you're considering, we would encourage you to start gathering that information even now on the front end so that you can be as informed as possible as you actually have to make that decision.
Yeah. Yeah, the more proactive you are in many of these situations, the better off you'll be then. And the other thing I'll say too is it's really hard when sometimes you guys will reach out to financial aid, and you guys as honor students, you're good students, and you're going to ask a lot of hypotheticals, right? So you want to go by and talk to the financial aid person. You want to say, hey, so what if I get a B? What will happen to that GPA? And they're like, I don't know, I can't calculate that. And you're like, okay, so here's a different scenario. What if? And financial aid is very, like, they don't like to work in hypotheticals because there could be all these different factors out there that they can't account for and take into consideration. So you guys like to put all these, like, and I have this happen a lot when I talk with students. It's like, well, and if I do this, and then what, and let's outline every possible fork in the road and find out what the repercussions would be. And financial aid tends to operate in a very like literal, here's the information, here's what happened, and here's how you can, like, here are your next steps then, right? But they have a much more difficult time trying to work in hypotheticals because they don't know. They don't know what kind of FAFSA you have on file, or what happens with this school, or how does the AP class impact this if I do this? Because until that actually happens, it's hard for them to try to give you accurate information then. And so just keep that in mind too. Because sometimes you guys will put out, I mean, I'll get emails from parents sometimes who are like, I just had one I answered this morning. It was like 10 hypotheticals. And I'm like, I don't know, like, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Like, I'm glad to help you, but I you know, these are super complex and yeah. Any other questions you guys have? Yeah.
So like anywhere that we can calculate our GPA, like in terms of hypotheticals?
Pretty sure you can on the MyUCF.
Yeah.
You can make what if scenarios, like if I get a C in this class, it'll give me this GPA, or it'll do this or whatever.
Yeah.
You can always stop by walk-in advising too. We're happy to show you how to do that if you want to do it longhand.
Oh wait. So is the GPA based on just your average what do you call average grade per credit, right? Is that just the GPA?
Yeah, well, it's based off the grades that you earn in your current UCF courses.
Per credit.
Per credit, yeah. So like
It is a
if you're-
weighted average, yeah.
Yeah. So if you have like you mean like a 4 credit hour class would weigh more than like a 3 or 2 credit hour class? Yeah.
Is there like a withdrawal deadline we should know for spring?
It's a while away.
Yeah.
The ad drops-
There's one every semester.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the ad drop and withdrawal deadlines are always published in the academic calendar. So if you Google UCF academic calendar and just select the corresponding term, they're published well in advance.
One question, if
Sure.
say you like fail a course or something and you do the grade forgiveness, does that, is that fine, like Benekiso or something? Sorry for another what if, but like.
Well, it depends. And the reason why it depends is because it depends on the grade. If you get an F in the course, Benekiso is. If you get a D in the course, technically you earn credit for that, but the GPA may play a role in the renewal then. But if you do grade forgiveness and you got a D, in some cases, it might be able to slide depending on what your other grades look like then. Yeah.
One other thing to keep in mind with grade forgiveness is how honors plays in. So just if you took the course in honors originally and then you take it for the second time not in honors, your original honors grade still is playing into your honors GPA. So that doesn't affect your scholarship award, but in terms of your standing with honors, just keep that in mind when you're deciding if or how to go about taking a course for a second time.
Wait, what's the point of like an honors GPA? What is it used for?
What is it used for?
Yeah. Oh, just staying in honors.
Right, yeah, so the 3.0 is the cutoff there for honors GPA. So if you think you might go below that, come see us. There's a probationary period if you mess up once, it's okay.
And that's just calculated
Yeah.
based on your honors sections.
Yep.
They want you guys to be doing well in your honors courses and not be bombing out them. You probably shouldn't be in an honors class of 20 if you're like consistently not doing well in just your honors sections. Then they might encourage you to, hey, take some regular ones instead. I don't see that. Do you guys see that? I don't know. You probably don't see that.
Once in a while, it's there as a precaution, but
Yeah.
we don't see it that often
Yeah.
necessarily.
Any other questions? Good. Well, I appreciate you guys coming out today. Thank you for attending. I hope it was useful information to you. And always feel free, you've got all these resources here between myself and your honors advising group, so ask questions if you have them. That's why we're here.
Let's give Luke a round of applause.